Welcome to the Believe, Be Real, Be Bold podcast for authentic daters. I'm your host, Dave in Denver. Each week, we invite expert guests to come share their knowledge, tools, and tips to help you show up as your most authentic self. Thank you so very much for coming back to the Be Real, Believe, Be Bold podcast. My name is Dave Glazer. I am so excited to introduce you to my guest, Miss Lisa Foster. She and I have known each other for a little while now. I knew of her long before we met in person through small circles that we run in. And I'd always looked up to and admired what she was doing on social media and communicating her vision and mission. But when I got the chance to meet her in person at a National Speakers Association event, I knew I just had to come up and introduce myself and tell her why I wanted to connect with her. So she has been on TED Talk. A great opportunity for you to learn more about her. Go search her, Lisa Foster, on TED Talk. And she is the creator of a community called Parillume. Lisa, let's start there. Tell me why and how Parillume came about.
Okay, well, thank you, first of all, for having me. And I'm so glad you came up to me at the NSA conference and that we started the conversation at that point, really, because you're right, we have run in the same similar circles, and I've heard about you for years as well. So that was a very fun introduction. So yes, Parillume really began 3 years ago in terms of the formal social enterprise of Parillume. But the history of it goes back to my own experience. I was sexually abused by my dad, and went on a long, heroic journey to not just survive that, but also to overcome and really thrive and create a life I love. And so I knew back at age 21 that when I was free enough, I would really want to make a difference in the issue related to sexual violation and what people experience. And so I didn't know that it would take a couple of decades and a divorce after 21 years of marriage and my only child graduating high school for me to really look up and go, okay, what's happening in this conversation about sexual violation? And I just noticed that though there had been incredible growth, especially around statistics, especially around neuroscience, where I hadn't seen the growth was really around what we got to have in the aftermath. So I saw that really all we got to be called were survivors, and it wasn't, though it's true, it wasn't enough for me to just be a survivor of sexual violation. I felt like I don't want to be identified by a crime someone else committed against me. So that's when I saw, okay, I want to bring my background and expertise in communication, in facilitation of groups. I had started a nonprofit. I had worked with small business owners, helping them work through limiting beliefs to find their unique contribution. And having worked through enough of mine, I knew it was time to really create Parillume. And the vision of Parillume is simply to transform the conversation about sexual violation from shame and silence to heroism and fierce hope. And the mission is to provide a lit path through the darkness of it with practical tools and a supportive community, which you're a part of, to transform survivors into thrivers.
Yeah, I love being a part of the tribe, and it's been truly positive influence in my life being a part of your community. So thanks again for letting me be a part of it. And who is it that comes to you, and what are some commonalities that you see from person to person?
So the type of client that I work with, and first of all, I don't want to step over the fact I'm so grateful you're a part of the tribe, and I love your mission of bringing the level of transformation you bring in our physicality for people specifically that have experienced trauma. That's just an incredible mission. So my ideal client is really the woman 30 to 50 who is up to something in their lives and they don't want the pain of their past stopping them in any way, and most especially related to sexual violation. So use the hero's journey, a simplified version, as a template and an invitation for folks. 4 simple stages: awakening, transformation, reward, and shining. And so the transformation tribe that you're involved in, that's stage 2. And that's where there's therapists and all sorts of different recovery experts. And so when I work with someone, I really check in to make sure they're ready for stage 3 reward, which is where the Free to Shine program is. And so we always have a conversation, and I check in to find out, okay, how much healing work have you done around this issue, or where are you at in life? And are you ready to be and play big and be a part of Free to Shine?
See, that's phenomenal. And that's really what drew me to you in the beginning, was your mission and vision is so powerful. And you said earlier that your client is up to something.
Yeah.
And does that mean that they're like a power player in their community, or are they just this bigger than life personality? What do you mean by that?
That's great. I'm glad you asked for clarification. So up to something means that there's something inside of them that they long to come forth. And one of the things that happens in the aftermath of sexual violation is that we have this knowing of, at times, of what we want to contribute or who we know ourselves to be, but there can be this fear of exposure, because violation in particular touches so many facets of our lives. And so the person who is up to something, it doesn't have to be that they're this, bigger than life personality. I work with all sorts of different personalities. But it's really like they want to be fully expressed, and they want to know who they are and what they want, and be able to access fully their voice, that internal state of knowing who they are and what they want, and their choice in their home life, in their career, in what they want to do with advocacy. I've had people who want to write books, or who want to, they don't want to be afraid to do that. They want to step forth without any kind of anything holding them back.
So they have their own purpose. They have their own mission. They have their own vision for what their life is supposed to be like. And you mentioned that key word that I love to talk about, which is personality. Mm-hmm. Now, what tools do you use in order to connect with their personality better? And what's the next step after that?
Yeah. So the tools that I use, which I love, are I combine 3 personality assessments, as you know. And I combine StrengthsFinders, Myers-Briggs, and the Enneagram. Mm-hmm. So that has been, what happened there is, that's part of session 5 of the Free to Shine program, which is the first offering that I created in Parillume. And so that was such a powerful tool for helping clients really understand themselves and have language to wrap around their strengths, and be able to capitalize and really have that sense of themselves filled in on the inside. And then what ended up happening is I got invited to begin to bring that outside of Free to Shine and outside of the conversation about sexual violation. So now there's a whole separate arm or offering that I do, and is actually really taken off in some fun and exciting ways. And so I do that work with individuals, couples, families, and teams. And so that is has nothing to do with sexual violation, has everything to do with how they can create a culture of honor instead of judgment, compassion instead of criticism, and really show up fully in the world and shine without shame.
That's awesome. And I think that's why I respect what you're doing so much, is because we take a proven assessment, mm-hmm. And you're combining 3 of my favorites. And I love the Enneagram. I mean, we can dive into it. I
hope we can later.
I'm a huge fan. But so the main purpose of those 3 assessments is to find out for them who they are at their core, and kind of what their tendencies will lead them to do, both in their decision making and patterns. Mm-hmm. Do you see that a lot with your clients, that there's like this aha moment once they find out more about themselves?
And, absolutely. Oh, go ahead.
And then they're able to grow even faster?
No question. I think it's really quite fun because with the combination, it's like this 360 perspective, and there are a lot of aha moments, especially, and you mentioned it yourself because I know we're both. This is like if I had to pick one assessment that I'm the biggest fan of, it's the Enneagram, because StrengthsFinders, Myers-Briggs, and the Enneagram are all descriptive. They describe parts of ourselves. So the ahas there are really like, oh, wow, I kind of knew that, but I didn't know how to say it. I didn't know that there was a way to define that, or that made me unique from somebody else, that I'm a connector, or that I have empathy, and that's somehow a special strength. But with the Enneagram, they're not only getting a description of how they show up in the world and the desire or the core motivation that runs the show, but they're also getting an understanding of the fear that drives that motivation, of how they show up in their default state of being. They're really getting a picture of what I call the invisible box of our persona. And they're getting the prescription or the way out. So with the Enneagram, for each type, there's also this invitation to healing that I call it Shine from Your Original Design, because each of these has an invitation, and the Enneagram's invitation is, in any given moment, a tool to shine our brightest and to show up at our healthiest self, being our healthiest expression, so all our strengths and personality can absolutely flourish.
Mm-hmm. I personally have seen that exact transformation in my life, thanks to just one Enneagram workshop, and then also connecting with you, and you quickly became one of my mentors, both personally and professionally. And we are dabbling in the Enneagram within our clientele that we work with here in person.
Good.
And of course, I like to stir the pot. I'm known as the challenger. And and without that external display or like recognition, and you said it so perfectly, a way to describe my behavior and my tendencies. Without that, I didn't have a prescription for personal growth.
Yeah.
It's almost like I needed a roadmap. And tell me about the roadmap that you help people reach their most authentic self.
Well, I mean, I think the Shine from Your Original Design is its own roadmap. Those and I really present it that way. I have 3 principles that I work with called Accept, Articulate, and Apply. And often when I speak on this issue to groups, or I don't know if you even know this, you might know this, that I actually act out the 9 Enneagram types, that I've been doing that for groups.
I didn't know that. I want to see that so bad.
It's so fun. And it depends on, like, I've done it for a financial group. So I'll act out the types based on finances and how they invest, and I'll have props or whatever. And then I've done it with, parents and business leaders. So it's super fun. But I call those talks Cracking the Code, because I do really believe that when we understand what our intention is, when we look at those 3 assessments, and especially when we have a little bit of facilitation or a little bit of training about how they can work together and how we can begin to map out solutions based on our authentic energy levels, based on what really jazzes us. And so I love doing that, because that changes how we approach business, that changes how we approach relationships. I mean, I find that those actually knowing how to apply these assessments, total game changer in terms of the whole of our lives. In fact, one of the things I say is, when we can learn to accept fully, articulate to ourselves and others, and then apply our strengths and personality, we really can create lives we love in every nook and cranny. So it's one of my favorite roadmaps. The other one, of course, is the hero's journey. So I do use that with my clients and in speaking and things.
That's so phenomenal. And it's so expertly put, like way beyond what I could even begin to conceptualize, to help somebody be their most authentic self. And once this process has started, and once somebody gets into this journey for themselves, how do they begin to show up more authentically to other people?
Oh, well, if you're talking just the cracking the code, just the assessments piece, are you referring to that right now?
Yeah, and then we're taking this roadmap and we're putting it in front of an individual or group or teams, and then what? Then what do we get to see as far as their authenticity and their personal growth?
Well, so it's, first of all, how I do my program, because I really believe in this. If I'm working with a couple or a team or a family of teenagers and above, I always do individual sessions first. So I do that first for two reasons. First of all, I want to I loved your use of the word edify early on, and thank you for the edification.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I love to do for people. I love to encourage them about who they are. And when somebody can have that encouragement, and when they, in a safe environment, can understand, in particular, the Enneagram and how their type might show up when they're afraid or when they're just in their average state and their coping expression, when they can begin to accept that in a safe environment without having to interact yet, it provides a context that I think allows them to then step into a group situation and begin to figure out how best to work together. So what I do with the individual, they get their cracking the code sheet, their one sheet with all their results. And then when I work with a couple, I put both of their results on one sheet. When I work with a team, I put the entire team's results on one sheet. And then I begin to train them and how they can accept, articulate, and apply their strengths and personality together. And so I actually give them scripts and help them learn how to deeply listen to one another, how to really come from a place of compassion for themselves and the other person before they begin to open their mouths to talk about an issue, and then how to turn a problem into a solution, into an attention that they begin to then ask the power of how question, which for me is, how can I capitalize on who I am to fulfill that intention, or how can we? And then they begin to crack the code together. So that's where it gets really exciting, when a couple or a team feel like they have common language and a common tool and common compassion and honor and acceptance to then begin to tackle some of the harder issues and turn them into solutions in their lives.
Mm-hmm. That's phenomenal. I can kind of see it kind of unfolding in front of my team here in my small business, but they're a part of it and they're totally loving what the Enneagram shows them about themselves, and then how we can piece it together. We're certainly not experts like yourself. Let's talk about the individuals coming together as a couple. And I know. So you gave us a little clap there.
My seal clap. This is what I do. Seal clap, seal clap.
And that's the topic at hand. We love to talk about relationships, and when one person is going through a growth phase and then they meet somebody new, how do you help them with the roadmap? How do you help them be successful in a relationship, be their most authentic self in that relationship, and show up as their best self also?
Yeah. So you're saying when someone is in growth mode and then they're starting to date, and so they're meeting someone for the first time. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah. Let's just paint that picture, because I think that's where we're all starting out.
Yeah. Well, I think what's beautiful for the person who's doing self-work is that they're like eons ahead of, the mass of humanity. Unfortunately, I mean, I don't mean to put down the mass of humanity. It's not about that, but it's just anyone who's choosing to be self-aware, conscious, emotionally intelligent, they're at a different level, and they can see things, and hopefully from that place have compassion and acceptance. And so the first thing I would say is, when you are approaching dating, I'll tell you, like, I'm about to celebrate 3 years with my boyfriend, my partner, Tom. And on our very first date, we met on Match.
Okay.
On our very first date, we were talking about these assessments.
Really?
Yes, I promise you. He thought he was an ENTP. He was a little mistaken. He's actually an INTJ. I'm an ENFJ. This is Myers-Briggs for those who don't know those letters yet. And so I say that because you can often tell the level of self-growth or work that someone's doing, and I would say authenticity on a first date. I think their willingness to show up and just be their goofy selves, or to be, even though we're all nervous. And I remember one of the things with meeting Tom, literally he told me something and like 3 minutes in, I was like crossing my eyes at him, like, you know, cause he went, it was just a goofy thing, which I'd never done, but it was this thing of, oh my gosh, I'm showing up as I am. I'm being a goofball, which is who I really am. And so there was that piece of there's space for me to show up in my quirkiness a little bit, you know? And there's a playfulness, which is an important value for me, but there was also really deep conversation. So in this conversation, we were talking about now mind you, whenever I went on first dates and I told people what I did with Parillume, that takes the conversation very deep, very quickly. So that was also a big sign for me. But yeah, I think those two things, like, can we, if we're doing that self-work, to practice just being big on the inside and loving ourselves and showing up in our authentic personhood, and then kind of seeing, can this person match us there? Is there some interest? What kind of self-work have they done? If you're a person who really wants a conscious, rich relationship like that.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I love that we're both on the same page and in the same mindset, because this personal growth journey for me has been about 2 years strong now. And often I meet people who aren't ready themselves, or just haven't begun their journey. Maybe they are ready and they just don't know what they're looking for, which is where I was 2 years ago. And I think it's all coming into fruition right now with the podcast and with our niche that we serve in our business here. But on a first date, how deep is too deep? Like how far do we go with grace and with authenticity and that compassion that you're telling us that we are encouraged to have?
That's a great question. And I think, you know, one of the things I talk about in the Free to Shine program is giving us our voice and choice. I said it a little bit earlier. So I don't think there's a recipe. I don't think, you know, obviously the work that I do, the person that I mean, I've been doing healing work now for 26 years. So like regular all the time, like my mantra in life is to live is to grow. So I can be probably scary for some folks in that level of, so I don't think people have to go and, you know, air their dirty laundry or like tell people their whole history in the first date. You know, truthfully, not everybody is worthy of that early on or at all. And so I think it's really about being very checked in to intuition, to what do I actually feel like authentically doing here? And I think it's a really good sign if we don't feel like we can be our goofy self or our serious self, or, you know, talk about some of the things that matter to us, that we feel like we have to sort of protect ourselves from that, or from that person. I think that's kind of a sign. Now, other times, depending on the personality. So I will say this, depending on the personality, it may take longer for them to open up. So I do think it's about being in your heart and really going, okay, was there enough chemistry here? Was there enough ease? Okay, I will say this, now that I'm talking about, we have this mindset, and you can tell me if you disagree with this, but I think there is a fiction in the world of romance. And that fiction is, it's like, it's more romantic to have it be hard and the struggle and like this, the romantic comedy version of love. And I'm here to say, I did 21 years of that. And now I'm doing 3 years of easy. And there is something to be said for easy. There is something to be said for, we get each other. And having that as a baseline. Now we got each other and we had the assessments right away as a way to capture in language the differences. That was a long answer.
No.
In there?
I love it. It's speaking my language because it's where I'm thinking ahead of where I'm at right now. Anyways, I don't disagree with you that the struggle and the challenge and the difficult relationship is glorified in our culture, in our society nowadays, with media, with movies, with songs, music, all of the above that have been classically teaching us how to behave as humans for decades, ever since the TV, ever since the radio, ever since music became so much a part of our lives. And to put it all together, or to break it all apart, there was one thing that you said in there: are they worthy enough for this vulnerable self that we carry with us? I recently gave a presentation on my stoic mask, and that's the mask that I wear most often. And when I do feel connected, when I do feel the intuition that I can share my vulnerability, me as a challenger, I love intensity. So I'm going to be very intense about that trust or about that experience that I'm having at that time. And it's truly my authentic self.
Mm-hmm.
And if I didn't go through that work, if I didn't go through that journey myself, I wouldn't be able to express that. Mm-mm. And the value of assessments first, yes. Mm-hmm. And then the experience of doing the work, that spiritual journey that needs to take place in order for us to be authentic.
Totally.
Did I just kind of sum up what you're trying to say?
Yeah, well, and I want to just comment on that for you as an 8, and I'm, the person that I'm with is an 8, is a challenger. And
the challenger.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing about understanding these Enneagram types is, for you, like vulnerability for an 8, that is your healing key. So, for an 8 to be able to trust the person that they're with can actually be a safe space for them. And that's a huge area. That's evidence of your growth, that you're willing to practice that. And for each of us, it's going to look a little different. And so for me, I'm an Enneagram 3, the achiever. And so my healing journey, not too far off from yours, is authenticity and is following my heart. And so I think that could be, I just thought of something. If someone understands the Enneagram, that could actually be a test for them almost. And I use the term test loosely, a test for them to see, do I feel safe practicing my healing key with this person?
That's a really good question. If we were to put that into simpler terms, like layman's terms, let's just dumb it down a little bit. How would you rephrase that so that the person who hasn't begun the journey kind of conceptualize what you're talking about?
So let me think about this for a second. Do I feel safe enough to practice with this person what I know my growth edge is? Whatever it is that I have become aware of, whether through the Enneagram or through therapy or through friendship or whatever, is a place that I am more fully loving and expressed and healthy in. Mm-hmm. Am I safe with this person to practice showing up in that way? Is that a little easier to take in?
I believe so, absolutely, because I can relate to that. Mm-hmm. Do we trust our intuition every time? Like, I'm just gonna ask you very boldly: should we trust our intuition every single time?
Well, I think so. I mean, I know we just, you and I both, you were in the soiree when we talked with Amelia Dorn about intuition, and intuition is about, and I love the way Amelia talked about this. She's the founder of Impact Personal Safety of Colorado, also on the tribe. Shout out to them. But she talks so expertly about the power of intuition to communicate to us what's happening in the present moment. And I would say, well, I say yes, follow your intuition. But one of the things she talked about is, we have bias, we have our fears, we have our lenses. So it's I wish it were a science, my friend, but it is an art. So that's all I can give you. It's like, it is a practice of, okay, am I responding out of bias now? Am I responding out of fear? So I'm putting up a shield and there's a perfectly fabulous person in front of me that I'm not allowing in? Or is that my intuition telling me, no, this is really not the right person? And that is a delicate dance. And that does require a lot of self-awareness, I think.
That's exactly where I wanted to kind of bring our conversation to culmination. Like your experience as a coach, your experience as a person who is thriving after surviving, and is sharing your message authentically with a growing community. I love the community that's being built. If somebody wanted to get a hold of you, get in touch with you, what's the best way to contact you?
Well, certainly Parillume.com, Parillume is the website, and there's a contact page there, or people are welcome to simply email me at lisa@parillume.com, and I will respond to their email.
And in addition to the Shine Soiree that's coming up at the end of the month, where else, what other types of events are in our community, local community, that authentic people can attend if they're looking for more knowledge, if they're looking to begin their own journey, like I began 2 years ago? Where would you suggest that they start showing up at?
You mean related to the Enneagram? Because I would certainly plug Brenda Abdilla's workshops. If she's going to be doing those, that's where you went. Those are fantastic.
Yeah, twice a year.
Oh, twice a year is when she does this. Okay.
I think so, yeah.
I know that Jess Bonasso on the tribe, I was just posting about her events. She does a monthly event. Now that is just for women. So are you talking about events where you can meet other people? You can all genders show up? Is that what you're asking?
That's a really good question, because sometimes that's not the safest environment for a man to show up in a co-ed or in a predominantly female environment, and vice versa too. So I'm not going to discriminate against one or the other, because if I'm more comfortable spending time in a room full of men to begin my journey, someplace maybe like a church group would be a good place, or Jason Kendrick was on the last podcast and he hosts a weekly event for men. Cool. Any other events, locations, people that you would recommend for somebody wanting to begin a journey so that they can find their true authentic selves? Where do they go?
Oh my goodness. Well, there's so many people on the Transformation Tribe that just are so deeply connected and spiritual and authentic. And, I'm even thinking about Nate Ewert and his Denver Hiking Club, and just, he's such a carrier of spiritual growth that just even being out on the trail with him can, be an invitation. So I'm trying to think if there's any other. I would definitely say if you want to look at the tribe, that is on the Parillume website under on the nav bar under Transformation Stage, Stage 2 Transformation. Certainly any kind of, I've got one. It just took me a second. For those who are coming out of a long-term relationship, or out of just recently divorced, or even not just recently divorced, maybe it's been years, I 100% recommend a divorce recovery group. And it is, a Rebuilder. They're called the Rebuilders, Rebuilding Your Relationship. Have you heard of this?
No, I'm brand new to this. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's huge. It's what I did. And when I was back in Parker, and I would drive all the way to Boulder. But they have a wonderful they have a wonderful series of workshops that are so healing and really help excavate some of the relational dynamics that can be such hindrances to starting a new relationship. So that would actually be one of my top choices, and that is for all genders. And you're not allowed to date in there, so they take that off the table.
Okay, good.
Yeah, so that's
all right. Thank you, Rebuilders. That's awesome. Yeah. And before we end our conversation for the day, There's something that I've learned from you over the past 6 months of my own journey that I want to touch on just briefly. Can you talk to us about the attachment theory?
Oh, yes, that's one of my favorite books. I have a couple books that I recommend to pretty much every client, especially if they're single. But yeah, the book Attached, and I never know the author's names, so forgive me.
I'll
Emily,
put the link down.
Okay, great. I give you half, you have to be like a sleuth to figure out what I'm talking about. But so attachment theory, I got this out of the book Attached. It explains it all. But that basically there are secure types of attachment and insecure. And according to this book and a whole bunch of research that they've done at a Columbia University, 50% of the population is secure attachment. And so they are really good at relationships. They are able to be intimate and start a relationship and stay in one. And then there's insecure attachment, and that's the other 50%. And 25% of the population is what I am, which is, oh my gosh,
Anxious?
Avoidant. Thank you.
Avoidant, yeah.
I was like, so anxious attachment. And that, for those of us who are anxious attachment, we love intimacy, we can do intimacy, but we get very scared that intimacy is going to go away. So we tend to, if we see any kind of shifting away of our partner or the person we're dating, we get more and more anxious. Then we have avoidant.
That's me. I'm an avoidant.
Got an avoidant in the house. A classic
Classic.
avoidant in the house. Okay. So avoidant, well, maybe if you want to talk about what avoidant is.
Mm-hmm. I've been thinking about this a lot in the last 6 months, and because we've been collaborating this past 6, 7, 8 months, I got wind of the book Attached from one of my clients who works with you, and I quickly leafed through the whole concept. And as I'm single and gone through my journey and am happier now than I've ever been with who I am, knowing myself, knowing my tendencies from the Enneagram, that was my baseline. And then discovering that I was an avoidant attachment style when I'm insecure. And this might be the differing opinion, because I believe it's more like a pendulum swing, where when we're insecure, we can swing from one side to the other. And I have a good illustration of this. I'll put it as one of the media pictures in the blog post. But for the first time in my life last year, I swung to the anxious attachment style. And for the most part, I'm swinging to the avoidant when I cross that midline of security. And it always has to be a trigger for me. Something triggers me, and then I swing one way. And I went through the experience of swinging the opposite way. So avoidant attachment for me is like, oh, I'm going to play it cool in the beginning. I won't text when I want to, I won't call. And 2018 brings about a lot of changes in the dating scene. And we could spend 3 more podcasts just basically on this topic, but it brings with it new challenges. And where if you come on too strong, then the avoidant is going to go even further avoidant.
Yes.
And I find myself not quite truly and this is so sad to say, but maybe not truly my most authentic self because of how people meet each other, that we really are pressured to play it cool in the beginning, where I'm uber independent. That's the persona that I want to put on. And it comes back to the stoic mask. It comes back to the avoidant attachment style of like, well, I'm afraid of rejection. I fear rejection. I have burden as a limiting belief. So it all comes into play of like, I may not text as frequently as I want. I may let it go 24 or 36 hours between engagements when we're just starting to get to know each other. And then I come back to this center point of security when I start to trust. It has a lot to do with my Enneagram Challenger type of trust. And when I begin to trust, when I am finding somebody that is worthy of the vulnerability and the authenticity, then I'm no longer an avoidant attachment style.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that. May I comment on that? Because there
Yes,
was
please.
so much there. There was so
Please,
much
I
there.
know that was
Yeah.
a really long, it was a
No,
really
I loved
long
it. I loved it.
spiral into Dave's world of being single.
Well, no, it was actually really helpful because I have a few thoughts about it, and I think they're really common. What you're saying. So one of the things is, first of all, how I would describe avoidant is, unlike the anxious, the avoidant, like you said, fears rejection, but it's a different kind of, like, the closer an avoidant gets. Truly, the closer the avoidant gets, the further they get away. So as someone gets into the inner circle, and they should be like this loving, intimate dynamic, an avoidant will actually treat them sometimes worse. And so what's ironic and challenging for any of us who are anxious or avoidant is that anxious and avoidance are totally attracted to each other.
Aren't they though? Yeah.
And it's like, that's the chemistry, and that's the charge, and that's the, will they call, will they not call? And so one of the things that really helped me, because I was getting over a breakup when I got a hold of that book, and this is before I met Tom, and it really helped frame for me, like, oh my gosh, what was happening? Because I didn't understand why I was like, would feel crazy, like, why is this person pulling away? And I had all these communication tools, and I would try to be in control, but I was still in such turmoil. So what I want to say though, about the pendulum you're talking about, there's actually a portion of the population that is both anxious and avoidant. And for both types, finding a secure is what helps us to be secure. And so, especially for the anxious types. So I think that is really powerful. And for me, this was actually one of the conversations I had with Tom on our first date. We talked about attachment styles, and he actually said, I might have told you this before, at the end of our date, he was going out of town for a couple of weeks, and he said, now I don't want you to, first of all, he set up the second date after the, at the end of the first date. And he said, I don't want you to be in anxious attachment because I'm totally into you. And I was like, it was so cute. And it was like one of those, like, you might be a keeper. You're listening, you're getting it. But what I would say, going back to your dynamic of, do I wait 24? Do I wait 36 hours? You said something really key. You said, I wanted to text them, but I waited 24 or 36 hours. Did I hear you right?
Yep. I think that's part of the story for sure.
Okay. So here's what I would say, and here's what I practiced. A no games policy, just from the get-go. Because if you are a person as you are, as I am, if we're people of real, like, growth mindset and authenticity and groundedness, the game playing is BS, and it hurts us, it hurts the other person, and is not a good foundation for an awesome relationship. And so that would be my biggest takeaway, is practicing. And that's also a clue. If the other person is playing games, or if they, and I mean, and I know, anyway, you get what I'm saying.
I totally understand it. And I'll be your guinea pig anytime you want, because each and every time that we connect and chat and talk, outside of Parillume, outside of the Transformation Tribe, but even the birthday that I saw you at last fall, or earlier this spring, like I become a better version of myself when I spend that time with you. So please, contact me anytime. We'll dive deep into attachment theory and the Enneagram, and Myers-Briggs and StrengthsFinder are very applicable tools as well when it comes to relationships, business, individual, family, and authentic dating. So I want to thank you again, Lisa. You are a bright shining light in my life, and I couldn't thank you enough for coming on and spending the time with us today. If Lisa's message resonated with you, please don't hesitate to reach out to her. Below in the show notes are how you can best contact her. Again, Lisa, thank you so very much.
Thank you.
My pleasure. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, take care.
Bye.
Oh.